The morning bell at Northwood Academy had a sharp, imperious tone, a sound that seemed to echo the very demeanor of its headmaster, Principal Alistair Finch. As students streamed through the venerable ivy-clad gates, their chatter and laughter were already a notch more subdued than one might expect from children aged 8 to 14. Northwood prided itself on its discipline, its academic rigor, and its unwavering adherence to a code of conduct that Principal Finch himself had largely authored and enforced with an iron will. Among the throng was 10-year-old Leo Hayes, a boy with a bright, inquisitive mind, a thatch of unruly brown hair that perpetually defied his mother's attempts at taming it, and a backpack that, on this particular Tuesday, felt a little heavier than usual. It wasn't just the weight of his textbooks and lunchbox. Nestled discreetly in an inner compartment, carefully wrapped in a clean tea towel, was his inventory. Leo was, in the hushed, admiring parlance of his closest circle of fifth-grade friends, the Candy King of Northwood. His enterprise was small, highly illegal according to Northwood's stringent regulations, but remarkably efficient. He offered a curated selection of delights, chewy gummy worms, sour belts that made your eyes water, miniature chocolate bars that were perfect for a quick sugar rush, and the ever-popular rainbow lollipops. He bought his stock in bulk from a discount wholesaler near his apartment, using the pocket money he meticulously saved and the small earnings he made from doing extra chores for elderly Mrs. Henderson down the hall. His primary motivation wasn't profit for its own sake, nor was it a rebellious streak, though he did derive a certain thrill from the clandestine nature of his operation. Leo was saving for the annual fifth-grade field trip, a week-long immersive science exploration camp in the Redwood National Park. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to see giant trees, study ecosystems firsthand, and sleep under the stars. It was also, unfortunately, incredibly expensive. His mother, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, was a brilliant, hard-working woman whom Leo adored. He knew she had recently started a very important new job in the city, one that involved long hours and serious-sounding phone calls that often left her looking tired but determined. He'd overheard snippets of conversations about budgets and policy changes, and though he didn't understand the specifics, he understood stress. He knew money was tight. His father wasn't in the picture, a subject his mother rarely discussed, her usually open face clouding over with a sadness Leo instinctively knew not to probe. As a single parent, Evelyn worked tirelessly to provide for him, and Leo, in turn, felt a fierce, protective urge to ease her burdens, even in small ways. The science camp fee was a significant burden, one he was determined to lift from her shoulders, or at least lighten considerably. He planned to surprise her with his savings. His store usually opened for business during the morning recess and the longer lunch break. His preferred location was a secluded spot behind the old oak tree at the far end of the sprawling schoolyard, a place partially obscured from the ever-watchful eyes of the yard duty teachers. His classmates, his loyal clientele, knew where to find him. Leo. "Got any atomic sours left?" whispered Ben, his best friend, sidling up to him as the bell for morning break rang. Leo grinned, carefully opening his backpack just enough to reveal the colorful contraband. "Fresh batch. Ben, 2 for $1, or 5 for $2 if you're feeling brave." Ben's eyes lit up. 5 it is. Transactions were quick, hushed. Money was exchanged. Candy was pocketed with an air of conspiratorial delight. Leo was fair with his pricing, a small markup for his trouble and risk, but nothing exorbitant. He even kept a small, coded notebook for trusted friends who were occasionally short of cash, a primitive credit system that operated mostly on honor. His enterprise was not without its perils. Northwood Academy, under Principal Finch, operated on a strict zero-tolerance policy regarding the sale of any unauthorized items on school grounds. The official reason was to prevent unhealthy eating habits and to avoid any form of unregulated commerce. Unofficially, it was another way for Principal Finch to exert absolute control. Mr. Finch was a tall, imposing man in his late 50s, with a perpetually severe expression, a precisely trimmed gray mustache, and a voice that could quell a riot in the cafeteria with a single, stentorian syllable. He was a stickler for rules, a man who believed that discipline was not just a part of education, but its very foundation. Students whispered tales of his legendary intolerance for even minor infractions. An untucked shirt could earn you a detention, running in the corridors, a stern lecture that felt like a public flogging. Selling candy, that was tantamount to high treason in Finch's well-ordered kingdom. Leo had had a couple of close calls. Mrs. Albright, a kind, elderly art teacher who sometimes supervised the playground, had once caught him mid-transaction. She'd merely raised an eyebrow, a twinkle in her eye. Leo Hayes. "Are you running a confectionery emporium back here?" she'd asked. Her voice laced with amusement. Leo had frozen, expecting the worst. But Mrs. Albright had simply sighed. "Alistair Finch would have your hide." Young man. He sees this as the first step towards anarchy and societal collapse. Just be discreet, dear. And perhaps share one of those gummy worms with an old lady sometime. She'd winked and walked away, leaving Leo both relieved and a little more cautious. Mr. Henderson, the stern mathematics teacher, had been less forgiving. He'd confiscated a half-eaten chocolate bar from a customer of Leo's and given Leo a glacial stare. "I know what you're up to." "Hayes," he'd said, his voice a low growl. "One more incident, and you'll be enjoying a long, uninterrupted chat with Principal Finch. And trust me, you don't want that." The threat had been real enough to make Leo even more careful. He changed his shop location frequently, employed a network of lookouts among his friends, and learned to read the subtle cues of approaching authority. His little business thrived, not just because he supplied a demand, but because he was seen as a quiet hero, a purveyor of forbidden joys in the otherwise austere landscape of Northwood Academy. His field trip fund, a large glass jar hidden under his bed at home, was slowly but steadily growing. That particular Tuesday morning, business was brisk. The news of a new shipment of extra-long sour laces had spread like wildfire. Leo, operating from behind a large recycling bin near the gymnasium, felt a sense of satisfaction as he counted his earnings. Another $10 closer to the redwood forest. He was just packing up, carefully rewrapping his remaining stock, when a shadow fell over him. He looked up, his heart lurching. It wasn't a teacher. It was a group of older boys, 6th graders, led by a notorious bully named Marcus Thorne, no relation to any potential future protagonists, merely an unfortunate namesake for this particular narrative. Well, what have we here?" Marcus sneered, his eyes glinting. Little Leo playing shopkeeper. Leo tried to close his backpack, but Marcus was too quick. He snatched it away, a couple of lollipops spilling onto the asphalt. "Hey, give that back!" Leo protested, his voice small but defiant. Marcus laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "Or what? Munchkin? You gonna cry to your mommy?" Leo's cheeks flushed. He knew his mother was a strong woman, but he also knew that involving her in his schoolyard problems was the last thing he wanted to do, especially now with her new, demanding job. He had to handle this himself. But Marcus and his 2 hulking friends were a different proposition from a patrolling teacher. Before Leo could decide on a course of action, or inaction, another shadow fell upon the group. This one was taller, more imposing, and carried with it an almost palpable aura of frigid authority. Principal Alistair Finch stood there, his arms crossed, his gray mustache twitching with displeasure. His gaze swept from the scattered lollipops to Leo's open backpack, then to the smirking face of Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne. Mr. Hayes." Principal Finch's voice was dangerously soft, a low rumble that promised an imminent eruption. "Am I interrupting some form of unregulated commercial transaction on school property?" Marcus Thorne's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of feigned innocence. "No, sir." Principal Finch, We were just, admiring Leo's interesting collection of school supplies. Principal Finch's eyes narrowed. He was not a man easily fooled, especially not by a known troublemaker like Marcus. But his primary focus, Leo sensed with a sinking heart, was not on the bully. It was on the contraband itself, and on the small, defiant boy who dared to flout Northwood's sacred rules. The Candy King's reign, it seemed, was about to face its most formidable challenge yet. Principal Alistair Finch's voice, though not raised, had the chilling effect of a sudden frost. Marcus Thorne and his cohorts, who moments before had been swaggering with playground bravado, now looked like deflated balloons. Thorne, in particular, seemed to shrink under the principal's glacial stare. "Mr. Thorne," Principal Finch repeated, his tone silky but laced with iron. "I believe I asked you a question. Is this an unauthorized marketplace you are operating?" No, sir, Principal Finch," Marcus stammered, all traces of his earlier aggression gone. "We were just— Leo was showing us his collection of wrappers. Sir, candy wrappers, for a school project." The lie was so transparently weak that even Marcus seemed to cower at its utterance. Principal Finch's mustache twitched, a sure sign of his mounting displeasure. His gaze, however, shifted from the now trembling bully to the smaller, considerably more frightened figure of Leo Hayes. He noted the open backpack, the telltale gleam of colorful cellophane, the scattered lollipops on the asphalt. "A project on candy wrappers, Mr. Hayes," Principal Finch said, his voice dangerously soft. "How resourceful. Perhaps you would care to elaborate on this fascinating academic pursuit in my office." He did not wait for an answer. "Mr. Thorne, you and your associates will report to the detention hall after school for a discussion about appropriate lunchtime activities and the virtues of honesty. Mr. Hayes, you will accompany me now." Marcus Thorne looked momentarily relieved to have escaped immediate immolation, though the promise of detention still loomed. He and his friends scurried away, casting nervous backward glances. Leo, however, felt a cold dread settle in the pit of his stomach. A summons to Principal Finch's office was, in Northwood Academy lore, only slightly less terrifying than a journey to the underworld. The walk to the administrative block was the longest of Leo's young life. Students in the corridors parted like the Red Sea, their whispers and curious stares following him like the accusatory spotlight. He kept his eyes fixed on Principal Finch's broad, unyielding back, his small shoulders hunched, the weight of his confiscated backpack, now evidence, feeling like a physical burden. Principal Finch's office was exactly as Leo had always imagined it from the hushed, fearful descriptions of other, less fortunate students. It was large, somber, and impeccably ordered. A massive mahogany desk, polished to a mirror shine, dominated the room. Behind it, an imposing leather chair that looked more like a throne. Bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes lined one wall. On another hung portraits of stern-faced past headmasters, their painted eyes seemingly following his every move. 2 national flags stood in stands behind the desk, adding to the air of solemn authority. The only splash of color came from a meticulously tended orchid on a side table, its alien beauty somehow making the room feel even more sterile and intimidating. Principal Finch gestured wordlessly to a small, hard wooden chair placed directly in front of the desk. Leo sat, his legs barely reaching the floor. The principal settled into his leather throne, the springs groaning faintly under his weight, a sound that seemed to Leo like a sigh of impending doom. For a long moment, Finch simply stared at him, his gray eyes unblinking, his expression unreadable but undoubtedly severe. Leo squirmed, wishing the floor would swallow him up. Finally, Principal Finch spoke, his voice a low rumble. "Mr. Hayes," he began, "Northwood Academy has a reputation for excellence, for discipline, for producing young men and women of character. That reputation is built upon a foundation of rules. Rules that are clear, rules that are fair, and rules that are, above all, enforced. Do you understand? Leo nodded mutely, his throat too dry to speak. One of those rules, Mr. Hayes, explicitly prohibits the sale of any unauthorized items on school property. It is a rule designed to protect our students from unhealthy influences, to prevent the development of a disruptive commercial environment, and to ensure that the focus remains firmly on education. He steepled his fingers, his gaze unwavering. And yet, it appears you have chosen to flagrantly disregard this rule, not just once, it seems, but as part of a systematic enterprise. He gestured towards Leo's backpack, which he had placed on the corner of his desk like a piece of damning evidence at a trial. Sir, Leo found his voice, though it was small and shaky. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. Truly. Not trying to cause trouble. Principal Finch raised a skeptical eyebrow. Operating what appears to be a miniature confectionery store from your backpack. Creating a candy cartel, if you will, among your peers. You don't consider that to be causing trouble, Mr. Hayes. You don't consider that to be undermining the very principles this school stands for. His voice, though still controlled, was rising in volume and intensity. He made it sound as if Leo were a pint-sized kingpin. It wasn't like that. Sir, Leo pleaded, his eyes wide with desperation. It was just a few candies. For my friends. And I was saving up. Saving up. Finch's expression hardened further. Saving up for what, Mr. Hayes? More illicit merchandise. Perhaps expanding your little empire to include what counterfeit toys illegally downloaded music. He was being deliberately hyperbolic, twisting Leo's small venture into something far more sinister. Tears pricked at Leo's eyes, but he fought them back. He had to make the principal understand. No, sir. It was for the science camp. The Redwood trip. It costs a lot of money. And my mom, she works really, really hard. She just got a new job. A really important one. And I know she's been worried about expenses. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to help pay for it myself. To surprise her. He looked at Principal Finch imploringly, hoping to see a flicker of understanding, of compassion. But the principal's face remained a mask of stern disapproval. Your mother's financial situation, Mr. Hayes, while unfortunate if true, is not the school's concern, Finch stated coldly. Nor does it provide any justification whatsoever for such a blatant and calculated breach of school regulations. What you call helping and resourcefulness, I call insubordination and the introduction of a disruptive, unregulated commercial element into an academic institution. What if every student decided to set up shop? Mr. Hayes. What would Northwood become? A flea market, a den of petty traders. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, accusatory tone. And who are your suppliers, Mr. Hayes? Where do you procure this merchandise? Are other students involved in this network? Leo stared at him, aghast. Suppliers network, sir. It's just me. I buy them from the discount store near my apartment with my pocket money. Principal Finch leaned back, a small, humorless smile playing on his lips. So you admit to a premeditated, ongoing operation. An operation conducted in direct defiance of established school policy. He shook his head slowly, as if deeply disappointed by the depravity he had unearthed. This is precisely the kind of behavior that, if left unchecked, erodes the very fabric of discipline and order. A strong message must be sent, Mr. Hayes. A message that such actions will not be tolerated at Northwood Academy. Leo's heart sank. He knew, with a sickening certainty, what was coming. Therefore, Principal Finch announced, his voice now taking on the formal, sonorous tones of a judge delivering a verdict, effective immediately. You are hereby expelled from Northwood Academy. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Expelled. For selling candy. Leo felt as though the floor had indeed opened up beneath him. His dream of the Redwood Science Camp, his carefully saved money, his desire to make his mother proud, it all shattered into a million pieces. Tears welled in his eyes, and this time, he couldn't stop them from spilling over, tracing hot paths down his cheeks. "No, please, sir," he whispered, his voice choked with sobs. "Please, don't expel me. I'll stop. I promise. I'll give back all the money. I'll do anything. Please. My mom." "The decision is final. Mr. Hayes," Principal Finch said, his tone unyielding. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Miss Jenkins, please come in." The school secretary, a kind-looking woman with worried eyes, entered the office. "Miss Jenkins," Finch instructed, "please prepare the necessary paperwork for Mr. Hayes's expulsion, and contact his mother, a Dr. Evelyn Hayes, to inform her of the school's decision and to request that she collect her son and his belongings." Leo's head snapped up. "My mom, she's in very important government meetings all day." "Sir, it's her new job. She might be hard to reach. Can I call her on her private line? She might answer for me." He knew his mother, despite her busy schedule, always tried to take his calls if it was an emergency. Principal Finch waved a dismissive hand. "The school will follow official procedure. Mr. Hayes, your mother will be contacted. You will wait in the outer office with Miss Jenkins." Defeated, Leo allowed Miss Jenkins to lead him out of the principal's imposing office. He sat on a hard bench in the waiting area, the expulsion letter, a stark white envelope, clutched in his trembling hand. Miss Jenkins tried to offer him a comforting smile, but Leo could barely see her through his tears. She made several calls, her voice low and professional. After each one, she sighed and shook her head slightly. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Miss Jenkins approached him. "Leo, dear," she said gently, "I'm afraid we haven't been able to reach your mother directly. Her office said she's in a series of critical, closed-door briefings for the rest of the day and cannot be disturbed unless it's a matter of national security. They've taken a message and will pass it on when there's a break." She looked at him with genuine sympathy. "Principal Finch has said, well, he said you are to go home for now. Your belongings will be packed and can be collected later. Go home. Alone. Expelled." The words echoed in Leo's mind. He felt a crushing weight of shame and fear. How could he face his mother? How could he tell her that her son, the boy she worked so hard for, had been thrown out of school? He managed to stammer a thank you to Miss Jenkins, then stumbled out of the administrative block and into the now empty school corridors. The silence was accusatory. He walked out of the school gates, no longer a student of Northwood Academy, just a 10-year-old boy with a broken heart and a future that suddenly looked terrifyingly bleak. He clutched the expulsion letter, its crisp edges digging into his palm, a formal decree of his disgrace. The candy enterprise, born of good intentions, had led to a disaster beyond his worst imaginings. While Leo Hayes walked home under a cloud of misery, his small world fractured by the morning's brutal decree. Northwood Academy was undergoing a transformation of a very different kind. Principal Alistair Finch, blissfully unaware of the personal cataclysm he was about to unleash upon himself, was a man possessed. The new Minister of Education, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, was due for her inaugural school visit that very afternoon, and Finch was determined that Northwood would shine as a paragon of educational excellence and impeccable order. From the moment the official notification of the minister's visit had arrived the previous week, a discreet but weighty email from the ministry's protocol office, Finch had thrown himself, and by extension his entire staff, into a frenzy of preparation. No detail was too small, no effort too great, to ensure that Dr. Hayes's first impression of Northwood Academy would be nothing short of breathtaking. The corridors, normally echoing with the boisterous energy of hundreds of children, were now unnervingly quiet, their linoleum floors polished to a sheen that reflected the anxious faces of the janitorial staff who had been scrubbing them since dawn. Every scuff mark had been buffed away, every stray piece of paper or forgotten gum wrapper banished. Classroom doors were adorned with freshly updated displays of student work, carefully selected pieces. Of course, showcasing only the neatest handwriting and the most orthodox interpretations of curriculum content. In the main reception area, a new, extravagantly large floral arrangement had appeared, its scent almost overpowering. Mrs. Gable, the school's long-suffering art teacher who was, in fact, Mrs. Albright from Leo's earlier, gentler encounter, though Finch rarely used her first name, had been tasked with creating a tasteful yet inspiring welcome banner. She had privately thought that a banner reading "Abandon hope all ye who enter Finch's domain" might be more appropriate, but had prudently opted for a more conventional welcome, Honorable Minister Hayes. Principal Finch himself was a whirlwind of nervous energy, striding through the hallways like a general inspecting his troops before a crucial battle. His normally severe expression was, if possible, even more taut, his gray mustache quivering with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He barked orders at passing teachers, his voice echoing in the unnaturally silent corridors. "Mr. Henderson, ensure that the fifth graders have their logarithm charts prominently displayed. The minister has a background in mathematics, I believe. We must showcase our commitment to STEM, Miss Periwinkle. Are the student greeters word perfect on their welcoming remarks? No fidgeting, no mumbling. They represent the best of Northwood. Someone remove that smudge from the brass plaque by the library entrance, immediately. Do I have to think of everything?" He had personally selected the student greeters Amelia Worthington, head girl, a model of prim deportment, and Thomas Cartwright, head boy, whose handshake was rumored to be able to crush walnuts. They had been drilled for hours on how to smile, how to speak, how to embody the shining virtues of Northwood Academy. In the privacy of his office, the same imposing room where Leo's fate had been sealed that morning, Finch rehearsed his own welcoming speech. He stood before the large mahogany desk, puffing out his chest, his reflection stern in the polished wood. "Honorable Minister Hayes," he declaimed to the empty room, "it is with immense pride and profound humility that I, Alistair Finch, headmaster, welcome you to Northwood Academy, a beacon of academic achievement and a bastion of disciplined learning." He paused, frowning. Was bastion too militaristic? Perhaps a sanctuary of structured pedagogy? He made a mental note to consider alternatives. His speech was a masterpiece of carefully curated self-praise, highlighting Northwood's above-average test scores selectively chosen. Of course, its strict disciplinary code, which he planned to present as a cornerstone of its success, and its unwavering commitment to producing responsible and productive citizens. He even considered, for a fleeting moment, mentioning the firm action he had taken that very morning against a student engaged in illicit commercial activities, a testament to his vigilance in upholding school policy. Yes, that would surely impress the new minister, a demonstration of his proactive and decisive leadership. He made another mental note. Meanwhile, miles away, in the quiet, sun-dappled living room of his small apartment, Leo Hayes was not feeling like a responsible or productive citizen. He felt like a failure, a pariah. He had stumbled home in a daze, the expulsion letter clutched in his hand like a brand. The apartment was empty. His mother was, as he knew, at her new, important job. He had tried calling her mobile again, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a desperate need for comfort, but it had gone straight to her professional, anodyne voicemail. "You have reached Dr. Evelyn Hayes. I am currently in meetings and unable to take your call. Please leave a message, and I will get back to you at my earliest convenience." He had left another message. this one more tearful and incoherent than the first, a jumble of expelled candy. Principal Finch. And I'm so sorry. Mom. Then he had curled up on his bed, burying his face in his pillow, the sobs shaking his small frame. The Redwood Science Camp, his meticulously saved candy money still hidden in the glass jar under his bed. Now a bitter reminder of his folly, his mother's imagined disappointment. It all swirled in his mind in a vortex of misery. He thought of Principal Finch's cold, unyielding face, his pronouncements about rules and discipline. Leo hadn't meant to be a troublemaker. He had just wanted to help, to contribute, to achieve something on his own. How had it all gone so terribly wrong? He felt a profound sense of injustice, a child's bewilderment at a world where good intentions could lead to such devastating consequences. Back at Northwood, the final touches were being put to the elaborate charade. Teachers herded their classes into an unnaturally straight lines, reminding them to smile, to be attentive, to only speak if spoken to by the minister. The school choir, drilled to perfection, stood ready in the auditorium, prepared to burst into a rousing, if slightly off-key, rendition of the school song upon a signal from Finch. Miss Jenkins, the school secretary, who had witnessed Leo's tearful departure, felt a pang of unease. She knew Dr. Hayes was the minister visiting. She had processed the internal memo, and she knew Leo's surname was Hayes. Could it be? No. Surely not. The Minister of Education's son attending a regular state school like Northwood, and being expelled on the very day of her visit. The coincidence would be too monstrous, too ironic. She dismissed the thought as fanciful, though a small seed of doubt lingered. She was, however, far too intimidated by Principal Finch to voice any such speculative concerns. As the clock ticked towards 2 p.m., the appointed hour of the minister's arrival, Principal Finch conducted one last, frantic tour of inspection. He straightened a slightly crooked picture in the hallway. He picked an invisible piece of lint off a teacher's jacket. He admonished a nervous-looking third grader for scuffing his perfectly polished shoes. Everything had to be perfect. His career, he felt, could well depend on making a stellar impression on Dr. Evelyn Hayes. He envisioned a glowing report, perhaps even a commendation from the ministry, a stepping stone to greater things, a larger school, a more prestigious position. He was, in his own mind, a model headmaster, a pillar of the educational establishment. He stood now at the main entrance, flanked by Amelia Worthington and Thomas Cartwright, his student greeters, their faces scrubbed and shining, their smiles fixed. His shoes gleamed. His tie was perfectly knotted. His speech was memorized. He was ready. He glanced at his watch. Any minute now. He took a deep, steadying breath, unaware that the strong message he had dispatched that morning in the form of an expelled 10-year-old boy was about to boomerang back with the force of a hurricane, aimed directly at the heart of his meticulously constructed world of order and self-importance. The afternoon of anticipation was about to give way to an afternoon of reckoning. Precisely at 2 o'clock, a discreet, dark blue sedan, unadorned by flags or official insignia, apart from a small, almost invisible government crest on the license plate, glided to a halt before the main entrance of Northwood Academy. It was followed by a second, equally unassuming vehicle. From the first car emerged Dr. Evelyn Hayes, the newly appointed Minister of Education. She was a woman in her early 40s, dressed in a sharply tailored but understated charcoal gray suit, her dark hair pulled back in a neat, professional bun. Her features were intelligent and composed, her eyes a clear, observant blue that missed little. There was an aura of quiet authority about her, a seriousness phosphined by her recent ascent to one of the most demanding roles in government, yet tempered by a warmth that often surprised those who expected a more formidable, overtly political figure. She was accompanied by 2 young aides, a man and a woman, both clutching briefcases and looking alert and efficient. Principal Alistair Finch, who had been practically vibrating with nervous anticipation for the past hour, nearly tripped over his own feet in his haste to descend the school steps and greet her. His practiced smile felt stretched on his face. His handshake, when he finally reached her, was perhaps a fraction too firm, a little too lingering. "Honorable Minister Hayes, welcome. A most profound welcome to Northwood Academy." Finch boomed, his voice resonating with a forced heartiness that barely concealed his underlying anxiety. "It is an unparalleled honor for our humble institution to be chosen for your inaugural school visit. We are all agog with excitement and anticipation." Dr. Hayes returned his handshake with a calm, steady grip. "Principal Finch, thank you for your warm welcome," she said, her voice melodious but clear, with no trace of affectation. "I am very much looking forward to learning more about Northwood and the work you and your staff are doing here." Amelia Worthington and Thomas Cartwright, the head girl and boy, then stepped forward, their faces scrubbed and shining, their smiles rigidly in place. Amelia presented a small, tasteful bouquet of locally grown flowers, while Thomas delivered his well-rehearsed lines of welcome, his voice only trembling slightly. Dr. Hayes accepted the flowers with genuine appreciation and listened to Thomas's speech with an attentive smile, thanking both students warmly by name, a small touch that seemed to momentarily surprise and please them, making their rehearsed smiles a little more natural. Finch beamed, mentally congratulating himself on his excellent choice of student representatives. The official tour began. Principal Finch, with Dr. Hayes at his side, and her aides a discreet distance behind, led the way, launching into his well-rehearsed spiel. He pointed out the pristine corridors polished with the diligence of our dedicated custodial team. Minister, the newly painted trophy case, a testament to Northwood's commitment to all-round excellence, and the state-of-the-art, though seldom fully utilized language laboratory. Dr. Hayes listened politely, nodding, her observant blue eyes taking in everything, not just the carefully curated displays, but also the expressions on the faces of the teachers they passed, the way students stiffened slightly when Finch's booming voice approached, the almost palpable tension that seemed to hang in the air despite the frantic efforts to project an image of serene efficiency. An impressive commitment to modern languages. Principal Finch, she commented as they exited the language lab. How do you ensure that your pedagogical approaches cater to the diverse learning styles and needs of all your students, particularly those who may find traditional classroom methods challenging? Finch, momentarily taken aback by the specificity of the question, he had expected more general platitudes of praise, quickly recovered. "Ah, an excellent question. Minister, we at Northwood believe in a robust yet flexible framework. Our dedicated teachers are highly skilled in differentiated instruction, yes, ensuring that every child, regardless of their particular aptitudes, is given the opportunity to achieve their full potential within our structured and disciplined environment." He conveniently omitted any mention of students who didn't fit neatly into his structured environment and were often marginalized or, like Leo, simply removed. They visited a fifth-grade science classroom where students, under the watchful eye of a nervous-looking teacher, were engaged in a pre-staged experiment involving baking soda volcanoes. The students recited their memorized explanations of the chemical reaction with an almost robotic precision. Dr. Hayes smiled encouragingly at them, asked a couple of gentle questions that a few of the bolder children answered, and then moved on. As they walked down a corridor lined with brightly colored, meticulously uniform artwork, towards what Finch announced was the exemplary fifth-grade English literature display, Dr. Hayes turned to him with a more relaxed, conversational air. "Principal Finch," she said, a faint, almost maternal smile touching her lips. On a slightly more personal note, "If I may, I understand this is an official visit, and your time is valuable, but my own son is actually a student here at Northwood. Leo Hayes. He's in the 5th grade." Finch, who had been in mid-flow extolling the virtues of Northwood's phonics program, stopped dead in his tracks, his mind, already juggling 1,000 details of the minister's visit, struggled to process this unexpected piece of information. Leo Hayes. The name definitely rang a bell, a rather discordant, unpleasant bell from that very morning. But surely it couldn't be that Leo Hayes, the Minister of Education's son, here selling candy. The idea was so preposterous, so far outside the realm of his carefully ordered expectations, that his brain almost refused to make the connection. It had to be another Leo Hayes, a different one, a well-behaved model student Leo Hayes. He forced a wider, slightly strained smile. Leo Hayes. Minister Y? Yes. I believe we do have a young Hayes in our 5th grade. A fine lad, I'm sure. Of course it would be our distinct pleasure for you to greet him. No trouble at all. A delightful surprise for the boy. I imagine he was babbling slightly. His internal composure momentarily rattled. The minister's son. He hadn't known. Why hadn't anyone told him Miss Jenkins would have his hide for not flagging such a crucial piece of intelligence? Thank you, Principal Finch. That's very kind, Dr. Hayes said, her smile warming. It's been a rather demanding first few weeks in this new role. As you can imagine, I haven't had as much opportunity to connect with him as I'd like. Just a quick hello would mean a great deal to both of us. I think. She spoke with the simple, unaffected sincerity of any working mother. Absolutely. Minister, consider it done, Finch declared with an excess of enthusiasm. He made a mental note. Find this other, exemplary Leo Hayes immediately. Get him cleaned up, briefed, ready to meet his distinguished mother. He'd have Miss Jenkins track him down. Yes, that was the plan. The Leo Hayes he had dealt with that morning, the small-time confectionery racketeer, was surely an entirely different, unrelated, and now thankfully absent, individual. The alternative was simply too ghastly to contemplate. He resumed the tour, his voice perhaps a shade louder, his descriptions of Northwood's glories even more effusive, as if to banish any lingering, unwelcome thoughts. He led Dr. Hayes towards the newly refurbished computer lab, a project he was particularly proud of. Though he privately considered computers a somewhat frivolous distraction from the more rigorous disciplines of grammar and arithmetic. Dr. Hayes continued to listen, to observe, to ask her polite but perceptive questions. She was, by all outward appearances, a minister of education conducting a routine school visit, interested in curriculum, infrastructure, and student welfare. She had no inkling of the small personal drama that had unfolded within these very walls just hours before, a drama that involved her own child. And Principal Alistair Finch, striding confidently beside her, basking in the reflected glory of a so far successful ministerial visit, remained blissfully, catastrophically, unaware that the polite, accomplished woman at his side was the mother of the boy he had so summarily and self-righteously expelled. The meticulously swept corridors of Northwood Academy were leading them, step by unsuspecting step, towards an intersection of public duty and private pain that was about to explode with the force of a long-suppressed volcano. The calm, for Principal Finch, was very definitively before the storm. The tour of Northwood Academy continued, each meticulously staged classroom and prepped teacher adding another layer to Principal Finch's edifice of self-congratulation. Dr. Evelyn Hayes maintained her air of polite, professional interest, though her questions, always gentle, often held an incisive edge that kept Finch on his toes. They had visited the library, admired the newly weeded school garden, and were now heading towards the 5th grade corridor. A destination Finch approached with a mixture of pride. It housed some of his best-performing classes, and a dawning, inexplicable nervousness. Our 5th grade curriculum. Minister, Finch was saying, his voice a little too loud in the quiet hallway, places a strong emphasis on critical thinking and problem-solving, preparing our young scholars for the challenges of middle school and beyond. Mrs. Davison's class, in particular, has shown remarkable progress in their creative writing projects this term. Dr. Hayes nodded. That's commendable. Principal Finch, a solid foundation in literacy and critical analysis is so vital. She paused, then added, her tone casual, almost an afterthought. Speaking of Mrs. Davison's class, I believe that's where my son, Leo, is placed. Leo Hayes. As I mentioned, if it's not too much of an imposition during an already busy visit, I would dearly love to just wave a quick hello to him. It's these small connections that keep us grounded, isn't it, amidst the demands of public life? Principal Finch's confident stride faltered for a fraction of a second. Leo Hayes. Mrs. Davison's fifth-grade class. The pieces clicked into place in his mind with the sickening, final thud of a coffin lid. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, unhealthy gray. His carefully constructed smile froze, then twitched. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't be. The Minister of Education, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, this poised, intelligent, powerful woman, could not possibly be the mother of the small-time confectionery miscreant he had so summarily expelled that very morning. The universe, even in its most capricious moments, couldn't be that cruel, that ironic. Leo Hayes. Minister. He stammered, his voice suddenly hoarse. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, but a bead of perspiration trickled down his temple. Ah, yes. Leo Hayes. A memorable name. Let me just confirm his current whereabouts with my secretary, Miss Jenkins. Sometimes the children are assisting in other classrooms or at a special activity. He was babbling, stalling, his mind racing, desperately seeking an escape from the horrifying abyss that had just opened up at his feet. Dr. Hayes's observant blue eyes noted his sudden pallor, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his gaze darted nervously around. A tiny frown line, almost invisible, appeared between her brows. "Is there a problem, Principal Finch?" she asked, her voice still mild, but with a new, almost imperceptible note of attentiveness. Problem. No. No. Not at all, Minister Finch exclaimed, a little too loudly. He fumbled for the intercom button on the wall panel beside him, nearly pressing the fire alarm instead. "Miss Jenkins," he barked into the speaker, his voice higher pitched than usual. "Could you please ascertain the precise location of Leo Hayes from Mrs. Davison's fifth-grade class? The minister wishes to greet him." There was a crackle from the intercom. Then Miss Jenkins's hesitant voice. "Leo Hayes, sir, from Mrs. Davison's class." A distinct pause, pregnant with unspoken meaning. Finch could almost hear the secretary's own dawning horror through the tinny speaker. But Principal Finch, sir, you remember, this morning." Finch jabbed the off button with a sweating finger, cutting off Miss Jenkins's incriminating reminder. He turned back to Dr. Hayes, attempting a reassuring smile that looked more like a grimace of agony. A slight confusion with the schedules. "Minister, nothing to be concerned about. Miss Jenkins is just double-checking. She's exceptionally thorough. Our Miss Jenkins, a stickler for detail, like myself." He let out a short, strangled laugh. Dr. Hayes did not smile. Her gaze remained fixed on him, steady, patient, but with an intensity that was becoming increasingly unnerving. Her two aides, standing discreetly behind her, exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance. They were trained to read nuances, to sense shifts in atmosphere, and the atmosphere around Principal Finch had just become decidedly glacial. "Principal Finch," Dr. Hayes said, her voice still quiet, but now devoid of its earlier warmth. "Perhaps you could be more direct. If there is an issue regarding my son, I would prefer to be informed of it plainly." Finch felt a wave of nausea. He was trapped. Cornered. He could see the headlines now. New education minister's son expelled on her first school visit. His career, his reputation, his meticulously crafted image of an exemplary headmaster, all about to be publicly, catastrophically, demolished. He licked his dry lips. "Minister," he began, his voice cracking despite his best efforts, "there has been a most unfortunate and, I assure you, entirely unforeseen development this morning. A disciplinary matter. You understand. School rules must be upheld for the good of the entire student body." He was floundering, his carefully chosen words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "A disciplinary matter involving my son, Leo Doctor," Hayes prompted, her voice dangerously soft. Finch swallowed hard. He felt as if he were standing on the gallows, the noose tightening around his neck. "Yes, Minister, regrettably, young Leo Hayes was found to be in serious contravention of Northwood Academy's established code of conduct. Specifically, he consulted a non-existent mental file, engaging in unauthorized commercial activities on school premises, a clear violation of Section 3, subsection B, paragraph 4 of the student handbook. He was reciting the rule as if it were a sacred text, a desperate shield against the impending storm. "Unauthorized commercial activities, Dr." Hayes repeated, her expression unreadable. "Could you be more specific?" Principal Finch. "He was selling candy." "Minister," Finch admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Operating a rather extensive, illicit trade in confectionery items. A clear challenge to school authority, and a potential health and safety concern, not to mention the disruptive influence on other students." He tried to make it sound as grave as possible, a desperate attempt to justify his actions. "Dr." Hayes remained silent for a long moment, her gaze never leaving his. The silence stretched, amplifying Finch's rapidly beating heart until he was sure everyone in the corridor could hear it. "And what action?" she finally asked, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. Yet each word landed like a tiny shard of ice. "Did you deem appropriate for this extensive illicit trade in confectionery items?" Principal Finch. He couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at a point somewhere over her left shoulder. In accordance with Northwood Academy's long-standing zero-tolerance policy regarding such egregious breaches of discipline, and to send a clear message that such behavior will not be tolerated. He took a ragged breath. The decision was made. Minister, for Master Hayes's immediate expulsion from the school. There, it was out, the terrible, unpalatable truth. Dr. Evelyn Hayes did not raise her voice. She did not gasp. She did not, in fact, show any outward sign of emotion at all, beyond a slight, almost imperceptible tightening of her lips, and a sudden, chilling stillness in her blue eyes. It was this very lack of overt reaction, this unnerving, absolute calm, that struck a new and more profound terror into Alistair Finch's heart than any tirade or outburst could have done. Her aides, however, were less composed. The young woman's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The young man simply stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. They looked at their minister, then at the sweating, trembling principal, then back at their minister, as if awaiting a signal, an order, a cue for how to react to this unprecedented, almost unbelievable, turn of events. Dr. Hayes finally broke the silence, her voice still quiet, but now imbued with a steely resonance that made Finch flinch as if he had been physically struck. "Are you telling me, Principal Finch," she said, each word carefully enunciated, "that you expelled my 10-year-old son from this institution this morning for selling candy, and that you did so without any prior consultation with me, his mother, or indeed, without any apparent attempt to understand the circumstances or to consider a more proportionate response?" The full, horrifying weight of the phrase "my son" finally crashed down upon Alistair Finch with the force of a physical blow. This was not just any misbehaving student. This was not just any aggrieved parent. This was Leo Hayes, son of Dr. Evelyn Hayes, the new Minister of Education, the woman who held the future of every school, every principal, in the country, in the palm of her hand. The woman he had spent the last week desperately, obsessively, trying to impress. His carefully constructed world, his reputation, his career. He could see it all dissolving before his very eyes, like a sandcastle before an incoming tide. The uncomfortable truth had not just emerged, it had detonated. And Principal Alistair Finch was standing squarely at ground zero. The carefully orchestrated facade of Northwood Academy's perfection, so painstakingly assembled by Principal Alistair Finch, shattered with the quiet, devastating impact of Dr. Evelyn Hayes's simple question. "Are you telling me, Principal Finch, that you expelled my 10-year-old son?" The air in the corridor, moments before filled with Finch's booming self-congratulations, became thick with a sudden, suffocating tension. Finch himself looked as though he had been struck by a physical blow. His ruddy complexion turned a ghastly shade of gray. His eyes bulged slightly, and the confident smile he had worn all afternoon dissolved into a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated terror. The connection, Minister of Education, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, her son, Leo Hayes, the boy he had summarily expelled for selling candy, had finally, catastrophically, been made. Dr. Hayes, in stark contrast, remained unnervingly calm. Her initial shock, if any, had been processed internally, replaced by a steely composure that was far more intimidating than any outburst of maternal fury could have been. Her blue eyes, clear and direct, were fixed on Finch, and in their depths, he saw not just the concern of a parent, but the incisive scrutiny of a high-ranking government official about to dissect a serious institutional failing. "Principal Finch," she said, her voice still quiet, but now resonating with an undeniable authority that cut through his panic-induced paralysis. "I believe this conversation would be more appropriately conducted in your office. My aides and I will accompany you. We have several matters to discuss regarding Northwood's disciplinary procedures and, specifically, the handling of my son's case." It was not a request. Finch, his legs feeling like lead, could only nod dumbly. The carefully planned tour was, he knew, irrevocably over. The showcase of Northwood's supposed excellence had just become the prelude to his own professional inquest. The short walk to his office, which he had trod with such self-importance countless times, now felt like a condemned man's final journey. Dr. Hayes's two aides, a young man and woman whose earlier polite deference had been replaced by expressions of grave professionalism, flanked them. Miss Jenkins, the school secretary, who had been hovering nervously nearby, paled even further when she saw the grim procession. Once inside the familiar, imposing space of his office, a room that had always amplified his sense of authority, but now felt like a trap, Finch gestured weakly towards the visitors' chairs. Dr. Hayes, however, chose to remain standing, her gaze sweeping over the room, lingering for a moment on the large, polished desk behind which Finch now practically cowered. "Please, have a seat, Principal Finch," she said, her tone courteous but firm. It was clear who was now in command. Finch sank into his large leather throne, which suddenly felt far too big for him. Dr. Hayes and her aides took the smaller chairs opposite, a symbolic reversal of power that was not lost on the terrified headmaster. "Now, Principal Finch," Dr. Hayes began, her voice even and measured, "I would like to see all documentation pertaining to the expulsion of Leo Hayes. That includes any prior disciplinary records, the formal report of the incident that led to his expulsion, any witness statements taken, and the official notification provided to his guardian." One of her aides produced a sleek tablet and a stylus, ready to take notes. Finch fumbled in his desk drawers, his hands trembling so violently that he could barely grasp the files. He eventually produced a thin folder, which he slid across the polished expanse of the desk as if it were contaminated. Dr. Hayes took the folder and reviewed its contents in silence. The only sounds in the room were the rustling of paper and Finch's ragged, shallow breathing. She read Leo's hastily written expulsion letter, signed by Finch, citing flagrant disregard for school policy and engaging in unauthorized commercial enterprise. She noted the absence of any prior warnings in the file, the lack of any documented attempt to contact a parent before the most extreme disciplinary measure was taken. After a long, tense silence, she looked up, her blue eyes coolly appraising him. "Principal Finch," she said, "this report states that Leo was expelled for unauthorized commercial activity. You mentioned earlier that he was, and I quote, selling candy. Could you elaborate on the scale and nature of this extensive illicit trade, as you previously described it?" Finch squirmed. "Well, Minister, it was a persistent issue. He had been warned, or at least there was a general understanding, that such activities were forbidden. He conveniently omitted that any prior warnings had been informal, and certainly not from him directly in a manner that would precede an expulsion. He was operating a rather organized distribution network. It was undermining school discipline. Minister creating a black market atmosphere. A black market atmosphere, Dr. Hayes repeated, one eyebrow arching slightly. My son is 10 years old. Principal, are you suggesting he was some sort of juvenile kingpin? No, of course not. Minister, not in those terms. But Finch was sweating profusely now, his carefully chosen words deserting him. The principle of the matter. Minister, the rules. We must have rules, and they must be seen to be enforced, or we descend into chaos. I agree that rules are important. Principal Finch, Dr. Hayes said calmly, as is due process and proportionality. Was Leo given an opportunity to explain his actions before you made the decision to expel him? Well, yes, I spoke with him in my office this morning, Finch said, trying to sound reasonable. He admitted to the transactions. And did he offer any explanation for his behavior, Dr. Hayes pressed. He mumbled something about a school trip. Minister, a rather flimsy excuse, in my opinion, for such blatant defiance. Dr. Hayes' expression did not change, but Finch felt a chill crawl up his spine. A school trip. You say the 5th grade science camp in the Redwood National Park. Perhaps. Finch blinked. Why, yes, I believe that was it. A costly endeavor. I know, but the school subsidizes a portion. Indeed, Dr. Hayes said, a costly endeavor for many families. Principal Finch, I would like to speak with my son. Now, could you please arrange for him to be brought here? Finch's heart plummeted. Brought here. Minister, but he was sent home. Expelled, as I said. Then please arrange for him to be collected from his home and brought back to the school immediately. Dr. Hayes instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. I trust Miss Jenkins can facilitate that with discretion. She then turned to one of her aides. Ms. Albright, she said, using a different name for her aide than the teacher Leo knew. Perhaps while we wait, you could locate Leo's homeroom teacher, a Mrs. Davison. I believe I would appreciate a few words with her regarding Leo's general conduct and academic standing. The aide nodded crisply and left the room. Finch felt the walls closing in. This was no longer just about an ill-advised expulsion. It was rapidly escalating into a full-blown ministerial inquiry into his entire stewardship of Northwood Academy. The wait for Leo was agonizingly long for Finch. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the corner of his office sounding like a hammer blow. Dr. Hayes used the time to ask Finch a series of pointed questions about Northwood's disciplinary policies, its procedures for parental contact, its support systems for students facing financial hardship, and its definition of zero tolerance. Finch's answers became increasingly evasive and contradictory as he realized the depth of the hole he had dug for himself. Finally, a tearful and bewildered Leo was ushered into the office by a grim-faced Miss Jenkins. When he saw his mother, his face crumpled, and he ran to her, burying his head in her side. Dr. Hayes held him close for a moment, her professional composure softening into maternal tenderness. "It's all right, darling," she whispered, stroking his hair. "Mama's here now, and we're going to sort this out." She then looked at him gently. "Leo, can you tell me, in your own words, what happened this morning, and why you were selling those candies?" With his mother's reassuring presence beside him, Leo, in a small, hiccuping voice, told his story. He spoke of the exciting science camp, of wanting to help his mother because he knew she worked so hard and had a new, important job, of his secret candy fund, of how he only sold them during breaks and never meant to cause any trouble. He even admitted that Mrs. Albright, the art teacher, had given him a kind warning once, and that he had tried to be more careful. As Leo spoke, Dr. Hayes listened intently, her expression unreadable, but her hand never leaving her son's shoulder. Finch listened too, a growing sense of dread coiling in his stomach. The boy's simple, honest account, so devoid of malice or defiance, was a stark contrast to the picture Finch had painted of a miniature commercial racketeer. When Leo finished, Dr. Hayes thanked him quietly and asked Miss Jenkins to take him to her office for a glass of water and a biscuit, assuring him she would join him soon. Just as Leo left, Ms. Albright, the aide, returned with Mrs. Davison, Leo's homeroom teacher. Mrs. Davison, a kind, middle-aged woman with worried eyes, looked nervously from Principal Finch to the minister. "Mrs. Davison," Dr. Hayes said with a gentle smile, "thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you about one of your students, Leo Hayes. Could you tell me a little about his character, his academic performance, his general behavior in your class?" Mrs. Davison visibly relaxed under the minister's calm demeanor. "Leo Hayes. Minister," she said, a fond smile touching her lips. "Oh, Leo is a delightful boy. Bright, inquisitive, always eager to learn. A little quiet sometimes, perhaps, but very thoughtful. He's an excellent student, particularly strong in science and creative writing. And as for his behavior, honestly, Minister, he's one of the kindest, most well-behaved children in my class. I've never had a moment's trouble with him. He's popular with his peers, always willing to help. This whole incident, this morning, it's just so out of character, so unbelievable." She glanced nervously at Principal Finch, then back at the minister. "When I heard, I couldn't understand it." Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mrs. Davison. That's very helpful." She dismissed the teacher, who left with a palpable sense of relief. The office was silent again, save for Finch's increasingly audible shallow breathing. The evidence was mounting, not just against his decision, but against his judgment, his leadership, his entire philosophy of education. Dr. Evelyn Hayes looked at Alistair Finch, her gaze now devoid of any warmth, replaced by a cold, clear light of professional assessment. "Principal Finch," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the undeniable weight of her office. "I have listened to your account. I have listened to my son. I have listened to his teacher. And I have reviewed your school's policies and the documentation you provided regarding this expulsion." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "It seems to me, Principal Finch, that there has been a profound failure of judgment, a disturbing lack of due process, and a quite frankly shocking absence of compassion in this matter. We will, of course, need to discuss the immediate remedies for Leo, but more broadly, This incident raises serious questions about the leadership and teamosphere you have cultivated here at Northwood Academy. Questions that I, as Minister of Education, intend to see answered thoroughly. Alistair Finch felt the last of his composure crumble. The minister's inquiry had been swift, incisive, and utterly devastating. His carefully constructed world of rules and authority lay in ruins at his feet, exposed as a hollow facade by the quiet determination of a mother and the simple truth of a 10-year-old boy. The silence that descended upon Principal Finch's office following Dr. Hayes's quietly devastating assessment was absolute. Alistair Finch himself seemed to have shrunk, his earlier pomposity and bluster deflating like a punctured balloon, leaving behind a man pale, trembling, and utterly stripped of his authority. He stared at the Minister of Education, his mind struggling to process the full, calamitous extent of his misjudgment. Dr. Evelyn Hayes rose from her chair, a signal that the inquiry phase was over and the time for action had arrived. Her aides, who had been diligently taking notes, also stood, their expressions carefully neutral, but conveying an unmistakable air of official gravity. "Principal Finch," Dr. Hayes began, her voice calm but carrying an edge of irrefutable authority. "Based on the information gathered this afternoon, including your own statements, my son's testimony, the input from his teacher, Mrs. Davison, and a preliminary review of this school's disciplinary procedures, or lack thereof in this specific instance, I have reached several immediate conclusions." Finch flinched, bracing himself. "Firstly," Dr. Hayes continued, "the expulsion of Leo Hayes is hereby rescinded, effective immediately. He is, and will remain, a student in good standing at Northwood Academy. Miss Jenkins." She glanced towards the secretary who had been hovering anxiously by the door after bringing Leo back. "Please ensure all records are amended accordingly, and that Leo is informed he may return to his classes tomorrow morning without prejudice." Miss Jenkins, looking immensely relieved to be given a constructive task, nodded quickly. "Yes, Minister. Right away, Minister." Secondly, Principal Finch, Dr. Hayes's gaze returned to the headmaster, her eyes like chips of blue ice. "Your actions today have demonstrated a profound and disturbing failure of leadership. You have displayed a shocking lack of judgment, an absence of due process, and a callous disregard for the welfare of a child entrusted to your care. Furthermore, your attempt to mislead me regarding my son's status was, to put it mildly, ill-advised." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Therefore, as of this moment, you are suspended from your duties as headmaster of Northwood Academy, pending a full and comprehensive investigation by the Ministry of Education into your conduct, your application of disciplinary policies, and the overall administrative and pastoral climate at this school. An interim head will be appointed by my office by tomorrow morning. You will be expected to cooperate fully with the investigation. Please hand over your keys and any relevant school property to my aide, Mr. Carmichael, before you leave the premises." Finch's jaw dropped. Suspended. Investigated. The words were a death knell to his career, his reputation, everything he had built, however flawed its foundations. He opened his mouth to plead, to apologize, to offer any desperate excuse, but the look on Dr. Hayes's face, calm, resolute, utterly implacable, told him it was useless. "Minister, Dr. Hayes, I can explain," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. The pressure of your visit. I wasn't thinking clearly. A mistake. Principal Finch." Dr. Hayes's voice was cold. "Expelling a 10-year-old child for selling a few pieces of candy, without contacting his parent, without any attempt at understanding or proportionate discipline. That is not a mere mistake. That is an abuse of authority. And it is precisely the kind of issue my ministry is committed to addressing." She gestured to Mr. Carmichael, her aide, who stepped forward with a polite but firm demeanor, defeated. Finch fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grasp them. The proud, authoritarian headmaster was reduced to a broken, humiliated man. Later that evening, after ensuring Leo was safely home, reassured, and even starting to feel a tentative excitement about the Redwood trip, Dr. Hayes had quietly made it clear that his savings were admirable and the trip would absolutely happen. Evelyn Hayes sat in her temporary government office, a stack of files before her. The Northwood incident, though personally distressing, had also served as a stark, immediate illustration of the challenges she faced in her new role. She convened an emergency meeting with her senior policy advisors. "What happened at Northwood today?" she told them, her voice devoid of personal emotion but charged with professional conviction, "is a symptom of a larger problem. We cannot have school leaders who rule by fear, who prioritize rigid, unthinking adherence to rules over the welfare and individual circumstances of their students. Discipline is necessary, yes, but it must be fair, it must be proportionate, and it must, above all, be compassionate and aimed at education, not mere punishment or the assertion of power." Over the following weeks, the Ministry of Education, under Dr. Hayes's direct guidance, launched a comprehensive review of disciplinary policies and leadership training programs across the public school system. The Northwood incident, though its specific details involving her son were kept confidential to protect Leo's privacy, became an internal case study, a catalyst for change. New guidelines were drafted, emphasizing restorative justice practices, mandatory parental consultation before any serious disciplinary action, and a tiered system of responses that focused on understanding and support rather than immediate punitive measures for minor infractions. Training modules for school administrators were revamped to include empathy, child psychology, and fair process. At Northwood Academy, the interim head, a widely respected veteran educator named Mrs. Eleanor Vance, no relation to Alara from the previous story, a purely coincidental use of a common surname, began the slow process of healing and reform. The investigation into Finch's tenure, as Dr. Hayes had suspected, uncovered numerous other instances of arbitrary punishments, favoritism, and a general climate of fear that had stifled both student and teacher morale. Alistair Finch was eventually, after due process, permanently removed from his post and retired in disgrace, his career ending not with a commendation, but with a quiet, ignominious exit. Leo returned to Northwood a few days after his expulsion. He was understandably nervous, but Mrs. Vance made a point of welcoming him personally, and Mrs. Davison, his homeroom teacher, ensured his classmates treated him with kindness and understanding. The story of the Candy King who took on Principal Finch and won with a little help from a surprise minister, though the details were fuzzy, became a minor legend in the 5th grade. But Leo, having learned a profound lesson about rules and consequences, had no desire to resume his former enterprise. He did, however, organize a school-sanctioned bake sale with his friends to raise additional funds for the science camp, an initiative that the new administration wholeheartedly supported. The Redwood trip was everything Leo had dreamed of and more. He saw the giant trees that touched the sky, learned about ancient ecosystems, and felt a sense of wonder and connection to the natural world that his mother knew would shape him in profound ways. He even managed to buy her a small, beautifully carved wooden bird with his legitimately earned money, a gift she cherished more than any expensive jewel. Dr. Evelyn Hayes continued her work as Minister of Education with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of the day-to-day realities faced by students, parents, and educators. Her tenure became known for its focus on compassionate, equitable, and effective education for all. She never forgot the lessons learned from Leo's experience at Northwood, the ease with which authority could be abused, the importance of listening to the smallest voices, and the profound responsibility that came with the power to shape young lives. Northwood Academy, under new leadership, began to transform. The oppressive fear lifted, replaced by a more open, supportive atmosphere. Teachers felt more empowered to be creative, students more willing to engage. It wasn't a perfect utopia overnight, But it was a start, a testament to the fact that one small incident, one principled stand, could indeed be the catalyst for meaningful change. Leo, for his part, never sold candy at school again. But he never lost his enterprising spirit, nor his quiet determination. And he knew, with a certainty that warmed him from the inside out, that his mother was not just the minister of education, but a true leader. A woman who understood that the most important lessons in life were often about kindness, justice, and the courage to stand up for what was right, even for the smallest of citizens.